Good morning. This is Angel. Well, I want to welcome you to episode 4 of Saying Goodbye. So, I just want to get into the whole saying goodbye is just saying goodbye to your past, saying goodbye to our trauma, saying goodbye to the ties of what was passed down to us, just the chains that hold us back, that we believe hold us back, a lot of things that, are so, that we allowed to be so challenging in our lives, and just sort of like trying to shed all of that and trying to learn, how I shed it, how I let go of it. And, I'm just going episode by episode, and I'm just letting go of all my, just the things, just my life, and just sharing with you my life and sharing with you what it was like growing up, and just trying to go piece by piece into my life, and just to let you in so that you could understand, so everyone can understand that even going through the worst things in life and then surviving it is not enough, and then making purposeful changes, being able to view yourself with honesty and understanding and love, and then being able to love yourself enough to make these changes and to try different things, and then to see what works, right? What's going to help you get better in life. And the only way that we could get better is by being around people that are either doing better than you, or on a road that you want to be on, or you could admire where they're at. And that is so important. I didn't want to do drugs anymore. I wanted to have my faith in God be strong. So how am I going to do that? I had to go to church, had to read some scripture, I had to, show up. I had to show up for myself in all these areas. There's so many different aspects to life, and there's so many different areas that we want to change. But first, we change the things that we've been doing for so long that just haven't worked for us. So whatever doesn't serve you, start getting rid of it. Start making purposeful changes. Start loving yourself, building a relationship with you, and things will start to come together. Doors will open, some will close, and it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be that some things will be in your life for different seasons, for different reasons, and some people are here to stay, some people are meant to be here for a short time. And when you start loving yourself and you start building a relationship with God, the doors will open, and things will start to will start to reveal themselves. And a lot of times you got to listen to your gut, not listen to your brain, because your brain is going to continue to tell you that you're not good enough, you're not worthy of anything, you don't deserve it, and you deserve it all. I deserve it all. We all deserve it. If you're willing to work for it and you're willing to do what you got to do, then everything will work if you just put the pieces together. And nobody's going to give you the pieces. Nobody's going to show you a map. But here, getting honest and leveling with you, like where I'm at and where I was at, and traveling back, and then transitioning into what it is that how I made it through the tough times in my life. I could only pray that it would help somebody else. And hopefully some people reach out and they say, well, Andrew, if you look at things this way or you do it this way, I'm open to suggestions. I'm open to anything. You know, I'm not above anybody. I'm not beneath anybody. And I think that that's probably the most important thing, that none of us are beneath anybody. You know, we're all, you know, similar people trying to have an understanding of what happened to us in life. What can we do to be better, feel better, do better, live better? And there's no perfect way to get there. You know, it's a struggle for all of us, but if we do it together and we help one another, it makes the situation a little easier to deal with and not so lonely, and it makes the pain a little comfortable. Right? You get a little comfortable with knowing that you're not the only person like going through these things, and you're not the only person that like survived these things, and you're not the only person that's struggling to be better and do better. Like, and you know, it's okay not to have all the answers, because we don't. Because the minute that we go and we find out that, oh man, I reached this pinnacle point at this part of my life, guess what? Keep coming back, more will be revealed. You know, life shows up and it throws curveballs, and you know, we always gotta readjust, figure it out, and then get back to working on it. Not running away from it, not numbing out because we don't want to feel the emotions. You know, it's been, I'm going on 13 years clean in November 23rd, 2025 this year. And I tell you, I continue to make mistakes. I continue to make bad decisions, poor decisions. And on the flip side of that, I can admit when I'm wrong. I can admit when I didn't do the right thing. And I go back to the drawing board and I pick up the pieces and I keep it going, because it's not a life sentence. It's just what it is. It is not making the best choice at times in life. And life is a revolving door for that. We're human. We're going to continue to make, you know, poor decisions, and that's okay. We're going to make the wrong choices sometimes. We're going to make the right choices sometimes. And we don't celebrate the right choices. We always look at the wrong choices, and we're viewed by the wrong choices, and we don't have to view ourselves that way. You know, we don't. So now we're just gonna keep going, and I'm gonna talk about where I was at, where I left off. And where I left off, I was giving thanks to an old friend that helped me out, like when I was 15, 16. And I started to come to terms with, you know, how critically damaged my life was. I started to really understand it because I started maturing. And I started realizing that I wasn't showing up for myself. I didn't have the capability to show up for myself. And I didn't understand what that looked like. I didn't understand what that meant to be an adult, to make decisions or to stick to things. And I really didn't learn that till later on in life. Unfortunately, that's just my story. That's the way it was. You know, there's no way to sugarcoat it. So, you know, I stayed with Tina for about 2 years, and at some point I think her and Booby stopped talking, and then she went and she continued living her life, and she moved on and moved to another state, and I wind up staying behind. I didn't want to leave New York. This is all I knew. And, I just stayed behind. And staying behind meant that I had nowhere to go. I had no one to turn to. I really didn't, no family was going to allow me to live in their house. And I think around that time, I had wind up reaching out to my brother. And he had an apartment on Troutman Street. And I wind up staying with him in Marisol. And my niece was just born. She was a baby. And, they let me stay for a couple months. It was like that a few months. It was nice, I appreciated it. And at a certain point, like, I stood there and then, I couldn't stay there forever. So I remained there for a few months until it was time for me to move on. And I left from there. I was always hanging out on DeKalb, and I was broke. And I'm not proud of the things that I had to do to make ends meet, but eventually, from being in the streets and hanging out with the guys, you see people making money, and you want to make money too. And I started getting into hustling, hustling in the streets. And it was, for me, it was a double-edged sword, because I understood what them drugs did to my mother. And then I was torn between selling the drugs or not having any money. I wasn't old enough yet to work. And I started off, with the marijuana. And then that doesn't move as fast. I needed fast money. I needed money now. And I started selling other things, Started selling the crack and the heroin, and that's where I really started making money. Started to understand that, I needed to probably get myself a room and do things like that. But also, as I started with the selling of the drugs, I started smoking more marijuana because I had more money. And then also, at that age, by 16, going into 17 and 18, then I started drinking more. And the money was there. Everybody would do it. I'm seeing what these guys are doing to numb out, they weren't numbing out. I was numbing out. A lot of guys, I don't know their story, but I know mine. And mine was that I wanted to bury that pain. And, as I started hustling, started making money, and having enough money to eat and do things like that, I was able to provide, the drugs and the alcohol. And I was able to, start buying myself whatever I want. If I wanted alcohol, I could have it, because nobody was telling me anything. Obviously, after a blackout night of wilding out, they yo, you wilding, you did all this crazy shit yesterday. But nobody was, it wasn't like a big brother move, because we were all chaotic. Growing up, living on, I didn't even live on DeKalb, but I lived there because I was always there. I went from staying with Anthony to leaving from there because it was already getting a little hostile. And, Anthony and I had a real bad fist fight when I was about 15 years old. And I think that we fought for probably an hour. It was crazy. We had a real nasty fight, and I think that we both understood that would be our last fight. That would be that was it. We were too big, and we hurt each other that last go round. And I was a little older, a little bigger, a little crazier, because now the alcohol started to take an effect. And I went from staying with Anthony. I really didn't have nowhere to go. I stood, well, my friend Donna, like, I don't know how she convinced her mother to allow me to stay there a couple of weeks. And she wound up doing that, and I wound up staying with Donna a few weeks, and I still with so many people. I still with SR, I still with Ray, I still with Wanda, I still with Mikey's mother. That was, they opened their doors, and, like, I stood with Irene, I stood with so many different people, like the neighborhood, like, bro, people were like, yo, you could sleep on the couch for 2 days, and I was out there hustling, trying to buy a gallon of milk for this house or bread for that house, and whatever I could do, to feel like some type of value, like I'm bringing something to the table. And I would do a little shopping, and I would stay for 2 or 3 days, and I'll disappear. And I used to be around, like, I always saw my mother with a bag of clothes and just things that she needed. And I picked up that habit of always having, like, a bag. And I had a bag with me everywhere I would go. And I would leave a bag in almost everybody's house. And that was my life for a lot of years. A lot of years living in the street. And it was just, that's when I started becoming an alcoholic, is when I really started becoming real violent. I was fighting all the time. I didn't care who, I didn't care what, I didn't care why. But that alcohol brought out the savage in me. Like from 17 or like 18, we were like going to the clubs. We were going to places we shouldn't be, strip bars, or everywhere. We was in the Palladium, we was in Latin Quarters, we was in Roxy's, we were in the Tunnel. We were anywhere that we could go and we could get in and we could pay to get in. We was in there at a young age. So all them things that people wait to do at 21, 23, 24, 25, we were doing that at 17, 18. We had the money. We could pay the bouncers. We could get in. We could do whatever. There wasn't cameras. There wasn't all this technology that there was now. And we got away with a lot of things. I was talking to my brother, SR, and he was like, yo, man, if there was video cameras of the things we did and the things we used to do and the shit that we got away with, not really, like, we got away with it that nobody could record it, but you pay for it. In this life, you pay for it one way or another. You really don't get away with anything because it comes back to haunt you. You always have to live with your decisions. You have to deal with that, with the consequences of what you decided in your life. And that is the truth. And I've had to deal with it and live with my decisions and live with the consequences of my decisions. And for like, I believe when I was already like 17, turning 18, Booby was like in and out of jail, and then he wind up coming home, and he was finally like done with parole. Tina was gone; she moved on with her life, and I was out here like hustling, and Booby was doing his thing, and he was like he had his own thing going on, and we're running parts of the block, and it was a lot of stuff going on, like at that time I was thinking to myself, oh, I'm on top of the world because my big brother was home from jail, and now I got somebody that got my back all the time, even though a couple of my brothers I know they had my back, but it's different when you have your brother, you know. And I loved him, and he was like, Booby to me was, he was like my father, my brother, my confidant. He was like, he. The reason I felt that way is because he would protect me. You know, he was also my biggest critic. He would tear my ass a new one. But he really he loved me. I know he did. You know, and he just was that big. He would grab me, would, you know, like put me under his wing, and I would allow him to do it because I respected him that way. You know, with anybody else, I was like, yeah, you're not gonna big brother me. Fuck that. When you tell me you're gonna do some big brother shit, we fighting. But with Booby, it was no resistance. It was nothing but love. It was nothing but respect. It was nothing but honor. It was just, you know, like, I looked up to him too. And it's not belittling him or anything like that, but I was looking up to someone that did a lot of time in jail, had multiple felonies, and really didn't have anything to fall back on, no future, no job, no skills to apply in the professional world, and it didn't matter. None of that shit mattered, because him and I together would professionally beat the fuck out of somebody. And that, whoever Booby told me to fight with, there was no question. I was doing it. I don't care. Big, fat, small, skinny, tall. It was getting done. And that was the obsessive compulsion of the street life, of that animal instinct of, yeah, whatever Booby says I'm gonna do, and I just had no guidance. I had no control. There was no discipline. There was no rules. It was just a dog-eat-dog world. It was like whoever wanted could get it for free. And that's where I really started to gain the reputation of this savage that people knew. I used to fight with my own friends. We used to all fight. We used to fight each other. We used to fight other dudes. We used to fight in the clubs. We used to fight. Everything was a fight for me. Everything. And the alcohol made it. So it amplified the pain. It amplified the aggression. It amplified all the wrong things. In my late teens, going into my early 20s, I was definitely willing to take it there with anybody for anything. I really didn't care. I didn't care who. I didn't care why. I just cared that there was something in front of me that I could punch. You know? I enjoyed that. And as long as I was fighting with somebody, nobody would bother me. And that was the biggest thing, that I had so much pain, and I was just so afraid of what might come back my way, that I was like, let me pour it out. Let me give everybody all this pain, all this rage. And as I you know, started with the alcohol. First it was the weed, then it was the alcohol, and then the drugs start to come. Now I'm a drug dealer, and I'm dealing the drugs, and I'm doing the drugs, and I sell drugs, and I say, oh, this crackhead or this dope head, and then I'm going to cop pills, ecstasy tabs. Then, you know, that started. Then it was that era of going clubbing and you're all twisted and drunk and doing all this stuff. And it was like the greatest thing in my life. I was set free for a few hours. I would forget about all the pain, all the misery, all the abandonment, all the childhood damage and corruption that was built into my brain, that it was disastrous. I remember those days like my knuckles. Remember those days, the scars I have. Because I used to give it and I used to get it, and it was all the same. I really didn't care. There were so many stories, that I will be able to unpack when I'm done with talking about my life and where I came from to like where I'm at. And it was the greatest time of my life to be free. I was free. The drugs would allow me to be free from all the trauma in my life. I finally felt like it didn't matter because the drugs would take me so far out. And it was just, it was a lot, selling drugs, who had the prettiest girlfriend, or who had the most girls, who was panty raider of the month. Like, it was ferocious with the competition with the men, who could fight where they're at on the scale, and who's the man, who's not, who got the best dope stamp, who sells the most, who stays out there the latest, who got money, who doesn't, who got jewelry. Everything was a competition, and it was all these things, but it was nothing. Because when the cops came, yeah, guys didn't have nothing. We were all scattering, and it was an imaginary world. And let me tell you, I'm not glorifying none of this shit. I'm not glorifying it and saying, oh man, this is the greatest thing. But at that point in my life, that was the greatest time of my life. To me, I'm going clubbing. I'm an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid. Going out to clubs, I'm able to drink, I'm partying, it's the illusion that everything was good, because to me it was. Because I got to not remember the pain and not have to deal with the pain and not have to accept it. Because as long as I was numb, I didn't give a shit about anything. I didn't care about anything. It was just about partying, having fun. When's the next party? Like, where we going? What we doing next? No kids, no nothing. It was, young. You got your whole life ahead of you. You're never gonna die. At that point, you think, oh, I'm never gonna die. But at that point, my brother Booger wind up getting murdered. There were a couple of people dying because of murder. We had a few other dudes, people getting stabbed, people getting shot, people, we had the overdoses, obviously. It's a whole different world when it came to that, and then you start running into the people that kidnap, people that murder, people that they're willing to do more things. And then life, it starts to get real, because the addiction starts to come. I started becoming like a straight up alcoholic, and whenever I would drink, people didn't want me around. I was a loose cannon. And it started to get bad with the addiction. You selling so much drugs to do so much drugs, but they're the drug addicts. I'm not a drug addict. I sell and I make money. They just come in a cop. It was all a lie. My whole life was centered on a lie, that I thought was real, and it really wasn't. It was a figment of my imagination. Like, who aspires to be a drug dealer? Who? You know, and throughout, like, my once I reached 18, 19, 20, Booby was already, like, on me, like, yo, you need to get a job, you need to do these things. I would go on a hiatus sometimes, and I would work a job for like 3 or 4 months, and I couldn't keep a job because I wouldn't give a shit. I was still on that mentality, like, you telling me what to do, I will beat the shit out of you. You don't know what I'll be doing in the street. And it's like, yeah, that don't matter. It don't matter in a professional settings. Nobody cares about that. People are here to work. They just want to know if you can handle your skill level. And depending on that is depending on whether you got favor and you got good people to deal with you. But I just wasn't a good person. I was rotten inside. I haven't dealt with none of my trauma. And there was nothing that I was going to do that was going to keep me in a healthy job. So I would work these temporary jobs. I would do construction. I'd do chimney sweeping. I'll do anything. I did all types of jobs. I worked all different types of jobs. I worked anywhere. It wouldn't even care. And I noticed that I always had the potential to do something really good with my life and just really like I knew that I could really be great in any area that I chose in my life. But I really liked the alcohol, I really liked the drugs, I really liked the lifestyle. And that called me. Like, addiction was like a part of my DNA. Addiction was my calling. Like, I was born to be an addict, to be in the streets, to be fighting. Like, this is what I was groomed for my whole life. And it was all a lie. It was all a lie. They don't tell you that you wind up being addicted. They don't tell you that you wind up with cold sweats. They don't tell you that nobody wants to be your friend anymore. They don't tell you that nobody wants to be around you. They don't want to tell you that everybody abandons being around you because you're intolerable. You know? That nobody wants to deal with you because you just become this disaster. You're just like a walking hurricane. Like, at least I was. I was causing terror wherever I went. Wherever I would go, it would be problems everywhere. And I was like, oh, you know, like, this is the way the streets are. No, that's the way I was. That's the way I was. And if I loved you and you were my friend and we were good with one another, then, you know, great. But that shit could turn once I drink a 40 of St. Ives. Because that's the shit I started drinking, was the cheap shit. And that shit made me violent as fuck. And it was just really, really tough for me to get a grip on any of that, man. To get a reality check and to stay on that reality check and to really make a decision in my life to make a change, because I wasn't deciding anything unless I was forced to do it. And, you know, I just really, really, I never had future plans. I never looked at my past and said, oh, this is disastrous. Like, this is just crazy. Like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to change my life? Hell no, I never thought of that shit. I thought of when we go into the next party and who's going to act up and who can I, you know, knock out. Who can I fight with? And who can I inflict pain on? And then ultimately, the person that I inflicted the most pain on was myself. I destroyed my life even more. And I thought, oh, it's my mother's fault, it's my father's fault. And then, you know, like, I grew up and I was destroying my own life. It's no longer my father's fault. It's no longer my fault. I mean, it's no longer my father's fault, my mother's fault, my upbringing, who was there, who was not there. It was just me, and I was the one at the wheel. I was making all these decisions. I was deciding all these things. I was saying, all right, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm not going to do. I'm not doing nothing healthy. I don't care. I was living a crazy life. I believe, before I went, I'll just backpedal a little bit, but before I went to try and live with Tina, I tried to reach out to my biological father. I never met him, and I didn't know where he was at. I was like 15 years old, 14 years old. And when my mother had ran away and she disappeared and I had really nowhere to go, I was trying to scramble. I was staying in my cousin's house in Cooper, and I was trying to find out. And I remember meeting my father for the first time. And the first thing my father said to me, after not knowing him all these years, and I meet him when I'm 15 years old, the first thing that he said to me was, hey, could you please not tell anybody that you know who I am, because welfare might come after me. Please don't tell the well. That's what it was. He said, hey, how you doing? He shook my hand. I don't remember if he said, oh, I'm your father, or anything like that. He was like, oh, where you been? And I'm like, where I been? Where the hell you been? You the man. And he was like, oh, do me a favor, don't tell welfare that you know where, or that you met me. Don't tell welfare that you know where I'm at, because they're gonna be looking for me. And I'm just like, the feeling that I felt when he said that shit, I was just like, this dude is a piece of shit. What a piece of shit. He's worried about welfare when I'm over here staying in the streets at 14, 15 years old. I got nowhere to go. And I try to I met him. I met my brothers from my father's side, and I met two of my younger brothers. They were there with him. They were excited to meet me, and I was wondering why they so excited. I'm over here with no place to live, but they don't come from that. They came from living in a house. They came from having both parents. They came from it was just a whole different life. I'm over here a rebel in the streets. And I stayed with my dad for a few months, and then I wind up leaving from there, and that's when Tina came into play and all these other things, and then I just started hustling, selling drugs, and then doing drugs. And then, I wouldn't do the drugs I was selling, but I would use that money to buy other drugs so that I could get high. And it went from ecstasy to acid to party drugs to eventually cocaine, but alcohol was the constant in all of it. Since I was a young kid, I used to steal the beers off the top of the table, and I would get drunk, and I didn't realize how much I loved the alcohol. I didn't realize that would be my best friend, was the bottom of the bottle, would be my ultimate calling. That would be the one to destroy me and allow me to destroy myself in the process. Because no matter what, there was always alcohol. And I could get it for free. And people would get me alcohol so I could just leave them alone. And I would go about my business. And by the time I hit 23, I was, I think 23, yeah. By the time I hit 23, I was a full-blown alcoholic at a young age. And it was not fun anymore. The partying, going out. I never even went to clubs no more after that because I did everything that people wanted to do before they were 21. It was done by the time I was 18, 19. Yeah, all that shit was already out of my system. I didn't even care. I just wanted to hustle or work or do whatever and just get drunk all the time and get high and pop pills. And I would go to a club here and there, and it just, everything was about partying and just numbing out and not caring, just as long as I didn't have to deal with the reality. And I continue to stay here and there. I never really had a place to go for a lot of years. I still, even now when I think about it, I'm still trying to understand, where the hell did I live? I don't know. I don't know where I was. I was everywhere, but I was nowhere. I didn't have a place to call home at all for years. For years in the street, I just stood all over. And it's in my mind, it's a blur. I had a little room here and there, but it ain't like I had a residence. With Tina, we was in 476 Harmon, man. I chilled with O, I chilled with Little O, I chilled with Swell, with Scott. It was all of us. We used to hang out, we used to have ciphers. Oh man, that was the best part of my life before the alcohol and the drugs came and all of that. And that was the first place I ever had in Harmon that was like a house, a home. And even with that, I would destroy anything that I put my hands on. I didn't have not even the thought of responsibility came to my mind, because responsibility was not something, accountability, responsibility, none of that shit, none of it mattered to me. I didn't care. That wasn't even part of my vocabulary. That wasn't even a thought. And then I'm 23 years old, full-blown alcoholic, violent as fuck, selling drugs if I could, and working and trying to do all these different jobs, but doing nothing. Always getting fired, always losing a job, always trying different schools. It was a lot to deal with. My alcoholism it brought me to the darkest part of my life. It was lonely. And then the alcohol amplified my loneliness and my brokenness, and my biggest insecurities were in there. And in order not to feel that pain, I would fight with other people. And as long as I could fight, people always thought I was important. And then I picked up the bad habit of thinking that as long as I fought for people or knocked somebody out or did something crazy, people would never, ever bother me. And that's what my life became, But today, I'm working on relationships. It's, my friendships that I have now in my life, it's important that I nourish them, that I treat them good. And, in friendships, in relationships with a significant other, or your friend, or your brother, or your cousin, or something in that nature, there's ups and downs, but today I have the capacity to have some resolve, to talk about it, to admit when I'm wrong, to come to terms, and to be okay with disagreeing and saying, all right, I hear what you're saying and I understand what you're saying, but I don't believe that. This is what I believe, and this is where I feel, and this is where I'm at. And I'm okay with that today. I'm okay with being able to communicate on that level. Things have changed for me in my life, and as I continue to unpack what my life was and where I'm at today, it has been a transition delivered by God, because there's no other way that I would be here if it wasn't for my higher power. And when I think about things, I think that with God, I choose trust over tension. I let go of that tension, and I choose to trust that God is going to always take care of me and see me through because of my faith and because of the work that I perform because of my faith. And it's, it's a beautiful thing to have that trust in God, and like every struggle in your life has shaped you and shaped me into the person that we are today, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm thankful, for the hard times, because those hard times, they made me stronger. They made me who I am today. And I appreciate the tough times. I appreciate the fact that I survived all these things, and now that I'm living. I'm not surviving, I'm living today. And that's the beauty of this story, that I could talk about it, and I could talk about the worst parts of my life, and then I could transition you into, I could bring you into, we could, sort of, it's like a metamorphosis of life, of how I came out on the other side. And, as you continue to watch and listen to this podcast, I will bring you through exactly what points where my life changed, how they changed, and you will see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I pray that it'll touch you in a way where you could understand that it ain't gonna be dark forever. And if you could push forward and you could hear this story and you could say, man, if he did that, I could do it. Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. Inbox me, man. You want to, hopefully we could set something up. I'm going to be looking forward to like the next episode where I could maybe get a number where you guys, somebody wants to call in, somebody's interested in telling their story, somebody wants to just have a conversation with me. I will make myself available, like whatever it is. Like you struggling with something and you just need to say something, talk to somebody that's going to understand you, somebody that's been through it. Yeah, I've been through it and I understand you. And I want to hear you out. And I want to help in any way that I can. That's what I'm here. I'm here to help and to be of service. And that's why God put me here, and that's my purpose, to be of service to other people, to love other people, to help other people, to give tough love to other people. Tell them, hey man, you wrong, you need to go this way, that's not the right way. And, I appreciate your time. And I had a friend she sent me something, and she sent me something the other day, and I have written it down here, and it's a quote, and it says, no amount of regret changes the past. No amount of anxiety changes the future, but any amount of gratitude changes the present. So for today, try to be grateful for everything, all of it, all together. I'm grateful for the worst because it gave me the grit to push forward to make it the best. So everything is a transformation in our lives. It helps to build character, to build strength, to build willingness, and to build that grit and that toughness to continue to push forward. So until the next episode, I'll see you, and we're going to try to drop an episode every week. And we are going to drop an episode every week. My laptop came in. Things are starting to take place. And I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening.